welcome today Melissa, who was a um, who was a former parishioner of Pope Leo before he ascended to the papacy, and who also has had experience working at the United Nations for the Holy See. Today we are very excited to hear about your experiences, Melissa, and we hope you can share with us about how it was working at the United Nations. So perhaps we might start with um, your relationship with Pope Leo as a parishioner. So how long have you known Pope Leo? And when you think of Pope Leo as a parish priest, what first comes to mind when you think of him in that context?
Well, hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm very glad to share my experiences with you and specifically one of the biggest, I think, gifts that God has ever given us as Peruvians and mostly me that I'm from Chiclayo, which is having a pope that it's so related to our culture. Firstly, Pope Leo was bishop in Chiclayo since 2015, if I remember, until 2021. So let's say that I was 13 years old when he became bishop, and when he left, I was 21. So he's basically the bishop of my adolescence, and I grew spiritually under basically guidance in general. I mean, even though I was, as any other parishioner, close to him in a general sense, he's the bishop, there's certain obedience and collaboration and assistance. His relationship was really close with basically everybody surrounding him. What I can remember, there's a lot of humility. He was always in touch with most of our parish groups, communities in general. So when he says in his inaugural speech that there's these faithful people that accompanied him and supported him, that's actually true. In Chiclayo, I mean, it's called the capital of friendship, so people is very kind, but towards priests specifically, we are really collaborative and cooperative in that sense. Every social work or project that he commanded, well, there was a lot of support from the people living there. Um, and that's where you can see basically under his guidance that there is this relationship, that this is a bilateral thing, pretty reciprocal between the parishioners and the priest, and vice versa, the priest and the parishioners. There's this sense of in which way we're serving each other, in which way we can help each other. And once you get to talk with people that were closer to him, you can actually feel that love and that loyalty that they feel for him and how happy they were to work with him. That's something that amazed me the most. Once he I have different experiences. Once when I was a child, if I can remember, we were doing before Corpus Christi solemnity celebration. We always tend to do things like, have you seen like we do some rocks on the floor, on the streets? I don't know. It's a pretty Peruvian thing, but I think people do it around the world, but well, with flowers and everything. So it was really late at night. It was like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I was a child, and my parents are from the Christian Family Movement, which is this Catholic kind of praying group that helps, couples, marriages, and also families in general. And he visited us in the middle of the night, and he talked with every single group, like literally like, we were more than 50 groups there, but he literally approached to every single one of them. And he were like, oh, what are you needing? Are your spiritual directors working with you? How are you feeling about this? It's really great. I mean, that's kind of the first memories I got of him. And later on, when I grew up, I worked with Caritas for a couple of months, and he already left to Rome. So he was not, on site anymore in Chiclayo, but I remember talking with the people that he worked with, and they spoke all the time so high about him in terms of how a great leader he is and how much he did socially and how many projects were actually done in such a short period of time in the pandemic to help people. And that was such a surprising thing to see. And in general, that openness and loving treatment to every one of us was the thing that basically like you can highlight of him. And so we cannot get over the fact that he's the Pope. Like literally, if you ever visit Chiclayo, he's everywhere. I mean, I can see his face in the city hall, in the cathedral, The other day, I went to have coffee with my parents, and literally his face was in the restaurant. There are like 20 murals of him everywhere. It's something that I think we can never get over it, like up till now. They just inaugurated a 5-meter statue of him in the entrance of Chiclayo. So, I mean, we're pretty much shocked by the idea, and we're still not recovering. But yeah, those are kind of the things that I can highlight about him. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. It seems like would have been very special to have person who is now Pope Leo as your bishop. Do you
Mm-hmm.
see any of his experiences as his time as bishop shaping his approach now as Pope?
I do think that that's kind of he has said a lot of interesting things about it. For example, technology-wise, he's such a pope of our time, and that's so interesting about it. So I studied in an Augustinian school, so I kind of saw him often, sometimes at school. And I mean, I just remember some friends of mine sharing some pictures of him with the Snapchat filters, which seems such a surreal kind of sense to put a Snapchat and the Pope in the same sentence. Um, and once he approached technology in the first week of him being Pope, it's such an interesting thing to see because he was always, in terms of speaking about communication and unity and how do we approach the conversation and how sometimes we need to disarm ourselves before we talk with someone. That's such an interesting thing that I remember him saying during his time as bishop. Also, the things about peace and unity and how important it is to basically understand what's common in between us. And that's something that also reflects upon my time in the United Nations working for the Holy See Mission. Is how can we approach into the issues that are surrounding us, recognizing what we have in similar, which is basically our human condition rather than our differences. That's also something that you can see a lot in his papacy and how he seeks for unity as I mean, as an Augustinian child, and it is such an interesting thing. And I can see those, the extension of him being a bishop and also his papacy, also the social work or the social sense of it. I mean, he picked the name Leo for a reason, and it's, of course, towards that importance of ourselves living in a community that it's interdependent and how much we need each other and how important it is to collaborate within each other, which is um, such a beautiful thing also that I get to see in his papers. And basically, there's a lot of reflectiveness. If you can see his inaugural speech is such a Pope Leo thing to listen to him and how he awaits to read every single thing he's reading. Like every single thing he's saying, I believe it's reflected upon. All his previous homilies are like that. That's his style. He's a reflective person, also pretty prudent. There are a lot of things that he thinks before he says, he's that type of person. And yeah, it was such a and the whole idea of him just waiting and see everybody outside, of course, the shocking experience of seeing, how universal the church is, how big it is, but in the general sense, that's the kind of thing he sees, he experiences, he listens, and then he talks. And that's such a beautiful way of see him. What you can see in the small side of it in Chiclayo in a normal mass on Sunday at the cathedral and into this bigger scenario, that's kind of also another extension of who he actually is. And it's great I mean, for all of us that have lived under his guidance, you can see, I mean, to see him in that type of expression, it's really surprising and beautiful. But yeah, those are the things I saw.
Thanks for sharing. So you mentioned about peace and unity, as well as a little bit about your time at the UN. So we might go on to that.
Hmm.
So could you share a bit about your work when you worked at the UN, what your role was,
Hmm.
and some of your experiences?
Yes. Well, let's say that the UN work, it's really interesting. Basically, I was an intern in the permanent observer mission of the Holy See to the United Nations. The name is pretty long, but it's really interesting to, I mean, it's another important gift in terms professionally speaking. So what I basically do as an intern and all my other fellow colleagues is that we basically are assigned to certain meetings that are occurring in United Nations for a period of time, and we are basically covering those meetings. So the purpose of that is to highlight the most important issues, the things that are discussed, and then elaborate reports that are going to be afterwards revised. And once they are reviewed and checked, they are sent to the Secretary of State. So the Secretary of State has always knowledge of what's going on in the United Nations. Um, and so there are four pillars in the UN work in general once it was created, which is fundamental rights. Then you have the rule of law, peace and security, and lastly, there is basically achieving development for all. So the missions work is also kind of divided that way, but in two main groups. You have the human rights and development group, and then the peace and security team. And meetings are going to be distributed in those groups, and you are assigned in different meetings related to the issues. Um, and what's cool about the experience actually is that you do not need to have like a political science, international relations, or law background necessary. I mean, if you have, that's better because you kind of get more like a wider idea of the whole United Nations work. But you can come from any other professional background and you can do and excel at it as well. So there's no need to have a specific or a preferred area or major. But I studied international relations and it was such a really incredible experience to be there and to kind of expand my knowledge in terms of multilateral diplomacy. And it's something that myself as a Catholic, I try to experience once. I remember I was in the middle of my major and I remember I wanted to kind of align both my career to my faith in certain way. I didn't know if that was possible, if there were like ways to do it. And I remember that when a professor that was also a previous intern at the mission said like, oh, but this opportunity exists. You should try it. I can write your recommendation letter. And I was really glad that he did that. And I applied and I got in, and that was such an amazing day. I remember it was an All Saints Day. I was so happy about it, so excited. And also the mission team is like a this big family. So you can pick the team if you're interested on a specific issue. I am really into human rights because I was previously a pro-life advocate, so that's how it started for me at the beginning. Um, and I mostly did gender and women and children type of issues associated with health during my time. So I remember they knowing me and knowing the issues that I preferred to do research on and basically dedicate my time to. They would send me to some meetings that are related to that, and most of the meetings that I cover were related to that topic. So I get to learn a lot of what other states said and other civil society organizations said. And it was such an interesting experience. And in general, that's what was it. And I enjoy the most the General Assembly meetings because sometimes Archbishop Gabriele, which is the nuncio, was there with us, and he will explain us, he will like within the meeting, he will explain some procedure things and details and how important it is to, follow this detail and this other, and why that issue that state highlighted so important. So you get a lot of opportunities to learn. And what else? Some experiences about it. I have a bunch. During the Commission of the Status of Women, I think the one I had a really hard day. I was assigned like three different meetings throughout the day, and the issues that I was covering were hard in the sense of how sensitive or how, let's say, controversial the issues were discussed. I remember I had a meeting at 7 a.m. and it was at the French mission, and it was on banning pornography and prostitution in France. And I mean, the state of France has a really strong policy against both pornography and prostitution. What I didn't expect that at 7 p.m. the AM there was like this big like protest outside of the French mission. Like a lot of people, most of them were sexual workers. So it was a really hard protest outside. They were not letting us in. Also, the Ministry of Women of France was arriving that day to the meeting. So there was a lot of people, a lot of shouting. We were afraid they were going to become violent. Most of them were sexual workers, which was and they were so young. That's something that struck me the most of how young the people outside where, and also you can see that there were adults with them. You don't know who those adults are, but the things that they were shouting were so heartbreaking and difficult to listen. And I mean, well, once you get in, I mean, the talk is interesting, but just with that intense, reality outside of the offices, that was something hard to recover from at 7. Like it's just early in the morning to having those types of emotions and experiences. But afterwards, I ran over to the UN for other meeting, and then afterwards, I went to the population fund of the UN. And of course, they were talking about abortion and some other different policies. And I remember how hard and how heavy the environment was about the issue. I mean, it's something that I need to, and I think I learned the most about the experience is how important it is to listen, even if you don't like that much the things that they are saying, or even if you do not agree. I think that once you come from a advocacy type of lifestyle in which, I mean, everybody wants to say something. We're always reacting to things, and we're always trying to prove points that are wrong, and we're always want to fact check, and we always want to be right. There's a lot of noise in the advocacy side of things. You tend not to, sometimes not to reflect or to stop and listen. And I think that last year, those 5 months where I was an intern, I get to listen a lot. I made silence basically those 5 months. I was not saying much of what I think. I was just listening to civil society organizations that did not think that much like me, or states that have different international policies or that highlight different things. And that's so important nowadays. I mean, if we are gonna work for unity, there should be a part of us that need to be sitting down and just listening. And let's try to understand most of the arguments that are being said. What are the reasons why people support or not support? What are political, geopolitical reasons, or I mostly ideological reasons? There can be different reasons in order to engage in debate, but you need to be eager to listen. And I mean, that's one of the things to comprehend actually what's going around the world. You need to be able to just make some silence and reflect upon that. So then when you talk about those issues, then you can come from a sense of, oh no, I already know what you're trying to say. I get you. But I think this can be different, or I can suggest other things. And well, I think that's one of the greatest lessons for me from the internship. And well, that's kind of a general overview of that.
Yes, thank you for that. Um, Also, for everyone else, if you have any questions, feel free to chime in, or you could even write them down on the chat as well. But I'd just like to go back to what you mentioned just now about listening. I think that's something that's very relevant in our world today, which, is one with a lot of noise, and, empathy is very important for unity. And what do you think, um, I suppose, were some of the challenges that you saw during your time at the UN, or even more broadly? And how is the Holy See perceived in the UN? How's the Holy See as a, I guess, non-government organization different to some of the other organizations that were working at the UN?
That's a really interesting question. I think that, well, let's say the Holy Seat's an observer, not because as observer state, not because the Holy See does not partake or does not have an opinion or a strong like view of things. The Catholic social teaching is pretty much straightforward in so many social, geopolitical. I mean, it's a really interesting text in the sense that when you revise it, there's a lot of things that we as Catholics sometimes we do not reflect that much, but in general, there's kind of an answer to everything. And I remember we were talking with the priest, the diplomat priest, and asking like what but why we're observers, why we're not voting. Would it be better if we vote? Would it be better if we can have like this different or perceived image within the organization? And then, I mean, the main argument for the Holy See to remain an observer, it's how important it is to remain free in terms of we are defending something bigger than the horizontal or more instrumental negotiations that most of the states are having in this sphere or in this scenario. It's not about defending military, or it's not about defending geopolitical intentions or interests. We are talking of something more higher and also deeper, which is how can we give certain meaning to all these discussions, and also how can we preserve this moral diplomacy outside of other types of materialism or negotiations and interests. And you can see that in terms of how other states perceive the Holy See within discussions. I mean, I cannot give out so much details because I mean, negotiations is more like a closed door type of meeting. But I do remember this experience when during the commission on on the status of women, CSW, the one that I was talking to you guys before, and I was in this negotiation and they were talking about motherhood and specifically um, there was this point in the agenda on unintended pregnancies as forms of violence, I remember. And most of states that kind of have certain, things in common with the Holy See's perspective. They were saying, but that's such a hard thing to define. How are we going to manage unintended pregnancies? In which ways? Is this statistically possible? I mean, they started, making up the doubts that are pretty much genuine and like, especially like important in those types of conversations. And I remember, I don't remember exactly the country, but there were a couple of them that said, but I think that the Holy See will have a better understanding of this issue. Please give the floor to them. And I remember at that time our negotiator actually spoke on terms of unintended pregnancies and how they should not be aligned or like related to any type of violence against women because and they just talk about the importance of motherhood and how important it is to take away motherhood to other types of discussion, not necessarily on terms of violence and I mean they give like this huge argument like in a thing of minutes and I was like how did this person manage to say all of that in such a short time? I was just like mind blowing. Um, and they took that out of the document, and that was crazy. I mean, it's just like the way of they like going back to the mission for actually the like bigger questions and deeper questions in terms of how do society relates to each other, family issues, also artificial intelligence. I get a chance to see how important it is, for example, when we're talking about ethics and morality and how technology is used like in ways that are not necessarily the best. There's like this reverence or this like a specific kind of highlighting. Okay, but what did the Holy See said about that? how can we how we should approach to this in terms, morally or ethically, what are the things that should be highlighted in this sense, and then go back to the mission, the Holy See, to wait for their answer or their perspective. And that's such a really great thing to see, like in general, that there's this moral way or this ethical way of doing diplomacy in which we can put the person at the center and we can still highlight the importance of valuing family and all these things that are part of our Catholic social teaching, and I'm glad that the world is eager to still listen to that. It's not like it's not over. It's not that they are not eager to listen what we say. They are, and sometimes it's important to still be there, even if we are not voting, even if we are not necessarily impacting in some of the usual conventional ways other states do, but we are still being listened. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. It's very enlightening listening to how, I guess, important it is for the Holy See, not just as an observer, but as a listener, really, to
Mhm.
act in moral diplomacy. I remember a few months ago at our university, we had the Apostolic Nuncio to Australia, and he was talking about how the church's teachings on on the environment, on Laudato
Mhm.
Si, were very important on in the international space as well for moving forward progress on that front. So. Yes, I think what you were mentioning about Catholic social teaching and bringing that moral and ethical element to diplomacy is something that, yes, is very enlightening and really strikes a chord with us. And so, I guess perhaps one final question from me before maybe we can open up the floor for some other questions. So from your time at the Holy See, if you could leave, I guess, Catholic students around the world, so all of us, with one lesson from your experience, what would it be? And is there any advice you would give to people in our position that might be thinking of
Mhm.
maybe similar experiences in the future as well?
Mhm. Okay, that's a really beautiful question. Apart from listening, I think something that I'm researching right now also I was deeply moved by how, as citizens, or basically as lay people, we can participate or engage in politics. Generally speaking, once you are at the United Nations, you get to see how many non-governmental organizations participate, and you know how they intervene and how they basically state their interests or their values, their agendas, and how they engage in those conversations. And right now, it's sadly to see, but it's mostly ideological. So you kind of ask yourself at the end of the day, because those are citizens, those are not states. We're not talking about governments, we're talking about citizens in general. And you kind of ask yourself, mm, are all these organizations necessarily here because of the major cause that they are defending, that there is mostly ideological, or they are here because they are interested in this person or in this group of people, or most than that, if there is this victim, you know, in terms of human rights, if there is this person that this, or that has been exposed to one or different types of abuse in general, what are they protecting? What are we defending? What do we want to project in those spheres of scenarios? How are we engaging in these conversations? What are the reasons or the intentions that we're bringing into debate? That's such an important thing to do, I think, and to basically reflect upon our way of participation, not necessarily their way, but ours. And once we are part of an NGO, or once we're part of the civil society association, how are we protecting the people that we want to defend? How our cause necessarily responds to this? You know, once we purify our intentions in terms of participating and engaging with these temporal issues, I think we'll be not necessarily more successful sometimes, because there are different political structures, and that will depend mostly on how um, our current realities are going on. But it could really help the people that are being unprotected, or that need our participation and engaging in that citizenship that we all have, you know. Um, we'll be efficient in terms of listening what the other person is going through, and we'll be doing the good social work that we got to do. I mean, in general sense, um, how we cooperate in our communities, how we engage ourselves in all these issues, how we do the social work that Pope Leo do in his time comes with that. It comes with listening, comes with reflecting, comes with listing the sense in which we are deciding how to be part of the community and the country we are from, you know, and specifically in college, where there is these where everybody wants to engage in different initiatives and projects and stuff. We need to uh, mostly get a sense of that. And I think that's the most beautiful thing of being in college and participating and engaging in other groups. You know, if we care about the environment, how are we caring about that? If we have, for example, with our own priests in our own churches, you know, if they are trying to direct this social project, if they want to, I don't know, formative projects to teach or show the catechism, how are we serving? How are we actually responding to that need? That's such an interesting reflection that we all should do in certain point of our lives, you know, and be cooperative with our priests, with the hierarchy of our church. That's something that I kind of also remember from the mission. There is this fatherhood sense between the priest and ourselves. I think that I love to see that, because once you can kind of get and grasp the full idea of how important it is for them to serve us, but how important at the same time is for us to serve them. And how I could see, for example, once you get expertise in a certain issue, let's say, I don't know, in the case of one of the negotiator was gender and health, you can see the diplomats, the priests approach to, and what do you think about this? You know, and how your knowledge and your God-given talents could actually help the work of the church and the work of the priests to give certain information and teach other people and keeping evangelizing. So I think there is this whole sense in which us as lay people can engage with the temporal issues that are going around the world, in our churches, in our communities, in our towns. And that's our way of actually maturing on our faith and maturing ourselves as young adults or adults in the future. So I think that's those are the main issues that, well, more than issues, those are the main lessons for me once I was in the mission, and that I take with me from now on. Now, when I participated at an NGO, I think, okay, what are my interests in doing this? Am I doing it right? Am I helping my community? And once I'm helping my community, how am I helping with the church work, how I'm engaging with all these conversations, how I'm helping, I don't know, my spiritual director, in sharing more about this or in talking more about the church's work in international sense. For example, for me, as I was an international relations student, how can I talk more about the diplomacy that the church has and how much us as students we can also participate because it's an open opportunity. I think there are three cycles of internships, and if anybody's interested, you can apply and you can access to that opportunity too, and you can see it for yourselves, and it's just, I mean, it's something that I do recommend a lot. And well, yeah.
Thanks for those reflections. Yes, I guess what struck me with from what you just shared was that pastoral and reciprocal relationship between our priests and ourselves. And I guess
Mhm.
that's something that would also relate to your experience with Pope Leo with his time as bishop for you. And I guess that's really a call for action for all of us to really engage in our
Mhm.
communities through listening, reflection, and initiative. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to, I guess, voice them out, or if you prefer, you can also just type them out in the chat, and I'll be happy to share them for you.
Hi, Melissa. My name is Maria. I'm from Brazil. I loved your speech. It was really interesting. And my question is about your work in the meetings. Did you need to talk with people or just listen? What exactly you do there?
Well, let's say that I did not do a lot of talking during the meetings. I was not the one reading the statements in general debates, nor that was more a diplomats and negotiator type of task. What I'll do is mostly of the time read, listen, and keep the record on certain things that they were saying. Let's say that if there was like a higher process, let's say like the commission population development. It was CPD. I don't remember right now because the name was so long at the time of the session. But let's say if it was like a 5-day process and you have the negotiators coming in and outside of the room. They are like, let's say that there's a lot of movement around in the UN. You're probably will be like, they will be texting UN, how is it going? What are the issues that are being discussed? Do you have these? I mean, it was mostly listening. Um, Also, I get it because since the Holy See has such a fixated type of perspective on some issues, it will better to leave it that for the priest or the people that are more like, let's say, have more information on the issues that have some expertise, and it's something that it's pretty much curated and it's really taken care of. And it's such a different way of perceiving it also because you're always asking, about what is being discussed. I think that within the first days, I remember the most like biggest challenge for me is that I'm not such an auditive person. I'm more visual. So I need to read or see pictures or, like schemes or something because I will probably get lost. So I remember that most of my questions in the first weeks were, so what do I need to pay attention the most? What are the things that I should kind of highlight from all that it's going to be said in 3 hours? What are the things that I need to really pay attention to? And they're more than glad to give you a little list or just suggest you what should you be paying attention the most. But yeah, I did mostly listening. And I feel not prepared to say much, actually, because I think that there's people you need to live it, you need to learn, you need to see it first, and then you'll get certain a sense of it, and then you'll be more than, I mean, prepared to say that. But it's not, that was not my responsibility at the time, and that gave me some peace of mind because it's such a important responsibility. Like, yeah, it was good. Hmm.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I can ask a question. Melissa, well, thank you so much first off for coming to speak. And I wanted to ask you, how do you think the Catholic Church can work to attract more people towards the beliefs and the values that we have, I guess, in this modern generation where we see, I guess, a wide variety of beliefs, a lot of political discourse, a lot of indecisiveness within people. How do you think the church can work towards kind of helping to bring people in?
Okay, that's a great question. I think what has work, not necessarily work, but let's say that has sound important for people nowadays is feel like they do have a father. That's a conversation that I got from some friends that just recently converted. And I mean, I've talked with them um, a lot, is the importance of understanding how a culture constantly tries to make us feel that we are first alone and that there's a lot of fear outside, to try things, to experience doubt and ask questions related to faith, but mostly how alone we are. I think that there's this sense in our culture where young people feel like they do not have like nobody else surrounding them, that they are themselves and they can try everything by themselves. They like themselves, and all changes in their life are just gonna be in their own authorship, and there's nothing else outside them, and sometimes they do project a lot of family trauma, a lot of uncertainty in that loneliness. And I think that even though we can think different from most people, or there are people that have grow apart from their faith, I think the reminder that they do have a father that is with them all the time, apart from, I don't know, it could be political stances and everything, and every single thing that can make us feel comfortable with being apart from our faith. I think that the importance of recognizing that there is someone that will not leave us, feeling ourselves as childs of God. I think that's such an important thing and such a moving thing that will start a whole thing conversion process for most of them, Um, and yeah, I'm praying for them. I guess I think that really interesting. I met this friend of mine. It was not during my time in the UN. It was from another period of time when I was a pro-life advocate. She was raised culturally Catholic. She had a sense of it, and she expressed to me how lonely she was feeling, and how common was in her group of friends at the time of the loneliness, or that she had to do all by herself, and there will be no one to support her, no like that. And I just remember saying to her, but you have someone, like it's not like you're alone. You're really not alone. If you think back in your life, all these opportunities where you were, I don't know, exposed to risks, or you were in the need of someone and you need a guardian angel, you were accompanied. You had someone all this time with you, even if you do not recognize it right now. And well, she converted and she's now like practicing her faith and everything. But I think it's starting that conversation of how you're not lonely, and how being a part of a church that is universal and have people from all over the world. I think we can talk about that later, but for example, seeing the transition from Pope Francis to Pope Leo within the mission was such an interesting experience too, because you actually don't get to see in a diplomatic scenario how what it means to lose a pope and then have another pope. It's such a crazy environment, and I get to experience that in the mission. But um, I remember seeing the excitement of people from all over the world, all the flags outside St. Peter's Basilica, and also ourselves watching the TV once the results were in. Uh, it's such an important thing to feel part of this massive family, like how much we can support each other, how much we can rely on each other. Even if you go to mass alone, you're not necessarily alone, because you can turn around and you will say peace with you to another person. So there's no sense of being lonely right now, even if the culture tries to push that narrative constantly. You are not doing any change spiritually, psychologically, or physically alone. You're always accompanied. And that sense of being part of something bigger than yourself, and recognizing that there's this father that will carry you, and this mother too, because you have a mother. It's such a beautiful thing, and that has moved a lot of hearts that are close to mine and that I know that have converted. So yeah, I would suggest that.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a great response.
Mhm.
Right, thank you, everyone. Any final questions, or we all good? Right, if not, thank you very much, Melissa, for joining us today and for sharing your experiences with us. I, for one, found it very moving and also very enlightening. Sh How you shared about I guess, what was very important in both a professional sense, but also in the sense of your faith journey. And it was great to see how both of those could actually overlap with each other. So we might draw this meeting to a close. So we might all end with the Lord's Prayer as a common form of prayer from all of us. So perhaps we will end. So in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. And in all things we give glory to God. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was at the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. So thank you very much, Melissa, for joining us. As always, we're very grateful for your time. And for the rest of us, if you'd like to stay behind just for a few minutes, I think Maria would like to share about plans for the Law Circle. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Melissa.